Recently I read my very first Robin Hobb novel. Let's see if she actually makes it onto the list. Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Angela and today I will be talking about 12 women writers that I really like. Yes, you heard me right, so not a classical top 10 list, but well, it's more or less buy 10 get 2 for free. Yeah, an excellent deal here on BookTube today. But also it's not your classical list because I will not rank them according to, well, how much I like them and then ending with my #1 spot, the best fantasy in ever or something like that. Because I really found that very hard to do, if not impossible. And I thought before we won't have any type of video and I totally descend into decision paralysis, let's do this a little bit differently. So I decided I grouped the 12 women according to their date of birth. And we will start with the youngest and then kind of work our way back. So the first on my list is Fonda Lee and her Green Bone Saga, with the first one. That's not the first one. This is the first one. Yeah, with the first book in the series, Jade City. We're starting off marvelous here. As far as I'm aware, this is her debut novel, Jade City, and also her first trilogy then, of course, the Green Bone Saga. So, and she is the youngest of the writers I have compiled here. So I like Fonda Lee a lot. Like a lot of people, I found this really refreshing, this setting that's set in Asia. The Green Bone Saga is kind of described always as a mix between, yeah, Godfather meets China or something like that, or an Asian urban fantasy. And yes, it is partly this, because we have different families, different clans that are, yeah, competing with each other, but also clashing with each other. But I think there is more to it than that, because the characters and also a little bit the plot lines are more epic or high fantasy, and then we have this, yeah, somehow urban setting. And this seems to be a combination that I really like. What I also liked is the magic. We do not really have a magic system as such, but jade as an element, as a type of stone, is able to carry then the magic. And that makes it interesting as well, because this can, of course, then the jade objects can be sold. So there's a market, but also, of course, when there is a market, there is other forces at play. It can be stolen, for example. So all this together makes this into a really interesting package. And even so, I think she is writing a new book. Maybe has even released it. I'm so not on top of book releases anymore, with kind of like all the hiccups in the publishing industry, the paper shortage and whatnot. I haven't a clue anymore when books come out. But even so, I've only read those 3 books, kind of like Jade City, then Jade War, and the last one, Jade Legacy. I still think that they were good enough and interesting enough for me to have her on a list of 12 women that I really like. So that was #1. The next on this list is a writer that seems to be very decisive. People either love her or hate her. Especially her second book seems to have this divisive power where it's either love it or hate it. And this is Erin Morgenstern. She has, as far as I'm aware, only written 2 books so far. So #1 is The Night Circus and the other one is The Starless Sea. I loved both of those books a lot. Also, Erin Morgenstern is, apart from being obviously an accomplished and talented writer, also a visual artist. So there is that aspect. So that's not necessarily kind of like a feature to get on my list of favorite women writers. So I like her because, yeah, her books are a little bit more quirky. Some of the main themes, I suppose, could be said is the power of love. In the Night Circus, we have this, like the circus from the title, who is only appearing at nighttime. You never know where it turns up, when it vanishes again. And yeah, it has those really magical and splendorous acts that we find with the circus. But then there's also, of course, kind of like this dark core when we find out what is actually going on and what this means to our two main characters, and then how those main characters get out of this. So it's kind of like, it's quirky, it's lovable, but it's also heart-wrenching at the same time. And yes, magical in its overall setup. And it's a bit similar with the Sff. A lot of people said they don't like the multi-POV structure of a Sff. I personally really like this and love this. This is about a guy called Zachary who comes across a very mysterious book in the library. And yeah, it transpires more and more that the book describes scenes from his life. And he then, of course, has to find out what's going on there. At the same time, we have kind of like masquerades and balls and clubs that have a very exclusive private membership. I personally like books that involve other magic books. It's one of those tropes I personally really like. So this was bang down my line. As I say, people seem to either love or hate her. I love her. So Erin Morgenstern is my second, yeah, favorite female author. And the next one on this list is also our first woman of color. She is, yeah, or has become more and more a really, yeah, very outspoken and interesting voice in what's called Afro-Futurism. So she herself doesn't like this term. She has proposed other terms by now that she says she likes better. And this is Nnedi Okorafor. And I have two of her books here. So I have the not read Lagoon here again. And I really kind of like, when I was compiling this list and I thought Nnedi Okorafor needs to be on the list, I really thought, you're stupid, you need to read this. I've read Binti, and Binti has really impressed me. I've also read, and I think I showed you this as well in my visual art and fantasy video, LaGuardia, which is a graphic novel. And this is something I really like about Nnedi Okorafor. She has written the text to several original graphic novels. So works in a visual medium as well, where she teams up with graphic novel artists, and then she delivers the story, the narrative, so to say, and they put it into wonderful pictures like in this book as well. So what I particularly like about her is how she deals with this idea of people who have a mixed ethnical and cultural background, because in Nnedi Okorafor's stories, they're the heroes. She really kind like seems to believe that if you have this, yeah, mixed background, that this qualifies you to, yeah, almost be like a savior figure, somebody who will kind of like be able to change the world into a better place. And this is the same in LaGuardia as well. And she's able to do this without actually shying away from the problems that people of color have in, yeah, Western and more white or predominantly white cultures. But also, as I say, there is this kind of like idea of hope. Now, in LaGuardia, for example, the aliens are basically stand-ins for immigrants into the US. And yeah, she also has a type of humor. I would say it's a type of humor that makes you think. For example, the aliens here give themselves new names. And this seems to be a common thing with people from African, but sometimes also from Asian cultures, if they have names that, yeah, in their host culture are unfamiliar, where they find that people find them hard to pronounce or hard to remember, that they seem to pick a Western name for themselves. In this, the aliens pick names where they think those are things that humans value. So if we name ourselves after those things, then we might get a better standing. And the names they pick are things like credit card, washing machine, takeout meal. No, so those things that we as humans seem to like and seem to venerate, and they hope that this will help them with their status. And yes, it's quirky and it makes you smile, but also it has a very, very sad background, of course. And you find this in her novels as well, and this is why I really like Nnedi Okorafor and why she's on this list. The next woman on this list is an author that I personally like out of two reasons. One is that she has a little bit of similar cultural background than myself. Her family from her mother's side is from Poland, and also, of course, that she writes fabulous books. And this is Naomi Novik. The book I have here is A Deadly Education, the first of her new trilogy. But what I really like her for, because this I haven't actually read yet, so I'm still looking forward to this, but books I've read by her are, for example, Uprooted and Spinning Silver. And both are like fairy tale retellings. And I think she really has a strength in that area. And yeah, Uprooted is actually set in Poland and uses parts of Polish mythology. And Spinning Silver is a retelling of the Rumpelstiltskin fairy tale. And yes, as I say, that seems to appeal to me, and yeah, I also think she is a really good writer. I like her style, and as I say, I haven't read Deadly Education yet, or the other two books in this trilogy. I think they're all three out by now, but I'm actually looking forward to this, and one of the reasons is the setting again. No, so this is built as dark academia because it seems to have a school setting, and it says on the back here about this school, once you're inside, there are only two ways out: you graduate or you die. So this is truly fantasy, because in today's academic systems, this would be totally unacceptable. Students dying. Students mean bombs on seats, which means money. Losing students or having a system where you actively kill off your students are not going to happen. So pure fantasy. Maybe that's why this appeals to me as a former educator. I don't know. The other reason is the school building itself seems to play a role, and if you follow this channel for a while, you know I like sentient houses, and this seems to be a little bit like this, where the building itself seems to have quite a say in what students graduate and which one don't make it. So yeah, so Naomi Novik is one of those that is on my list. The next is again a very kind of like revered author by now, and this is N.K. Jemisin and her Broken Earth trilogy. She has written more than this trilogy. Unfortunately, I've only read the Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemisin so far. She again looks at themes of identity, oppression, colonialism, but also has a strong, how shall I say, ecological element and ecological issues in her novels. So in the 5th season and in the Broken Earth trilogy in general, we have a group of people who can draw energy from the earth itself, and either use it for good or even not so good purposes, but it makes them very powerful and people are afraid of them and then start hunting them down. So if you are part of this group that can use magic, you are actually not in a good place. So having this, how shall I say, capacity is not a good thing in this world. So the magic makes you powerful, but the magic does not necessarily automatically grant you better access to anything, but rather the reverse. And yeah, she teams this kind of like with an interesting way of writing. It's not a big secret anymore that this is written in a second person narrative, and also that this actually serves a purpose, and that in the last book you then find out why this is the case and what's actually going on there. Yeah, I found this very original, as I say, this second person narrative, but also the way how she uses certain tropes, how she, the whole setup, what is magic in this world and how the magic is used. I thought those are kind of like very original, very refreshing. And she won the Hugo Award for all 3 of the novels in this trilogy, and I think rightly so. So yeah, N.K. Jemisin. The next 2 women on my list are very new discoveries for me. I've only read them very recently, and I only read 1 book by each of them very recently. And they're, yeah, back to back here, which is also very interesting, which is just, yeah, by the power of this chronological grouping, so nothing to do with themes or anything. So the first of those is Janny Wurz and her The Curse of the Misfits. This is the only book I've read by Janny Wurz so far, from her The Wars of Light and Shadow series. And oh boy, do I like this book. This is really, again, one of those writers who are able to, just with the very first book, hook me and get me interested, that I say, yes, I really want to read this. And I really, really hope I will able to yeah, join this read along that Philip Chase, Joanna, Jimmy and AP, I think, God, I hope I got this right, are doing. It'll be a tall order because there are 11 books in the series, and I am still reading Melazen, yeah, but also, as I say, I find her a very impressive writer. I've also seen a couple of interviews with her by now, and I have to say she seems to be a really impressive woman as well. So yeah, Janny Wurz, just 1 book read by her, but that book was good enough to make it on my 12 women writers I really love list. And the other one, of course, is, yes, you guessed it, Robin Hobb. Again, I've only read Assassin's Apprentice so far, but I really love this book. The language is just something else. It's so, so beautiful. And for that alone, she deserves to be on this list. But also the way how she deals with this orphan child trope. Now, as I say in my recent review of her, it's dealt in a way that it feels fresh, that it feels interesting. So yeah, Robin Hobb made it on the list with just 1 book that I know by her. I haven't read anything else by her, but this was good enough to get her onto this list. Yes. The last 4 on my list are all women that I discovered around the same time. They're not, well, they're almost of the same generation, but not strictly. But they're kind of like all 4, of course, are older writers that have long spanning careers, that have written a lot. Yeah, and as I say, I discovered all 4 of them in a very kind of like short time period in my life. So yeah, they're grouped together again out of not just chronological reasons, but this chronology works for other inner reasons as well. The first of them is Patricia McKillip. I've read altogether 4 books by her, and I really have to say, I don't know why I stopped reading her, because she has written a ton of books. Now she has a really wide spanning back catalogue. The books I've read are the Riddle Master trilogy, with the Riddle Master of Head, Air of Sea and Fire, and Harpist in the Wind. And I read those when I was still in school. I still hadn't done my leaving cert or my Abitur, and I think I picked her up because, yeah, I had this kind of like, I want more fantasy. What else is there apart from Tolkien, which I at that stage had reread already once. So yeah, I was ready for something else. And yeah, Patricia McKillop and the Riddle Master trilogy was then what started to fill this kind of like hole that Tolkien had opened up, and where a lifetime on fantasy reading has gone into at this stage. So yeah, that was my first encounter of her, and she is somehow for me linked, yeah, to the summer, those summer holidays between my last 2 years in school, where I kind of like was sitting on a balcony and kind of just inhaling Patricia McKillop. So yeah. Later, I was already in Ireland at that time, because she only died this year, so she only died very recently. Now, as I say, she had a very long career. When I was already in Ireland, I found out that she has published a new book, and this was Alphabet of Thorns in 2004. And again, I thought, oh wow, she's still writing, because I actually didn't know that she was still around and still writing. So that's the fourth book by her that I read. Also, yeah, the Riddle Master trilogy, I read this in German, no? And since I've read Alphabet of Thorns, I always was thinking, you should go back, you should reread this in the original, you should reread this in English, which hasn't happened because so many other fabulous books. But yeah, she's definitely an author where I sometimes think, when I hear her mentioned, which is unfortunately not that often, but I think she really deserves more attention. And I also think I should go back and read her again and read more of her. The next one in this quartet of women is Angela Carter. I discovered Angela Carter when I was in university, doing my undergrad degree. And yes, I think she was mentioned in one of the lectures. Hadn't anything to do with fantasy or fantasy literature, but some professor mentioned her in a lecture, and I thought I'll follow up on this, and this is how I discovered Angela Carter. And the first book I read by her was the book that was then just out during this time, that's Nights at the Circus. And then I also read other books like The Magic Toy Shop and The Passion of New Eve. I think I talked about this as well when I did my Artificial Bodies video. So she featured there as well. Angela Carter was a bit of a revelation because one of her big themes is female desire, and also the darker sides of desire in general, male and female desire. But she also kind of like does a lot of fairy tale reworkings, retellings, and rewrites some of them into really very dark, almost disturbing stories. And if there is a woman where we can say that she has written grim and dark before there was anything that would qualify as grim dark, then that's probably Angela Carter. So yeah, she impressed me a lot when I read her first, and yes, she is also on this list. The next one is somebody who could be called the founding mother of Afrofuturism, and that's Octavia E. Butler. I found Octavia E. Butler again in those kind of like early undergrad years, but not her first book Kindred, but her Pattern Master series. This is a bind up of the 4 Pattern Master novels that are out there. There were 5. She withdrew one, but I think the 5th one is again available as an e-text, so you can actually still read that. This is called Seed to Harvest, and it has those 4 novels: Wild Seed, Mind of My Mind, Clay's Ark, and Pattern Master. They're more science fiction, and I found them totally mind-blowing in some respects. You have very powerful beings, godlike beings, male and female, who come together, clash, love each other. So they're novels that are really kind of like exploring, yeah, the whole span of human experience, so to say. And she does this in a really, really interesting way. So this is how I discovered her first, with the Pattern Master series. But if you want to try out Octavia Butler for a first time, I would actually say try this Kindred. It's, I think, a little bit more accessible. Kindred is about a young black woman who is forced to time travel. It actually opens really with a bang when she comes back from one of those time travels, but we don't really know what's happening yet. And it's a really, really dramatic opening that this book has. Yes, and we only find out slowly through the novel while she's traveling back, although she seems to have no control over this. She never knows when she's ripped out of her time and then thrust back into an antebellum America. Yeah, where there's slavery. So she's in the south of America, in a slavery state. And yeah, it's not safe for her to be there as a black woman, no, where black people have 0 rights and are slaves. And as I say, she never knows, will she come back out of there? When will she be ripped again and has to time travel again? And only slowly we find out why she time travels. I found this an absolutely fascinating book, and would highly recommend if you want to try. As I say, Octavia E. Butler, Kindred is definitely a very good place to start. The second last on this pile is, again, as I said, somebody I found, and I found her, actually, I can tell you the exact year when I found her, and this was 1985. 1985 is a year when one of her books came out, and the author I'm talking about is Margaret Atwood, and the book I'm talking about is The Handmaid's Tale, which was published in 1985. And The Handmaid's Tale made a stir in general, but it also made a stir in Germany, because Margaret Atwood spent time in Berlin on some type of writer's retreat or something like that, or giving workshops. I don't remember exactly anymore why she was there, but part of The Handmaid's Tale was written in Germany. So there was this, yeah, Canadian author who was sitting in Berlin and writing a novel, and when it came out, it says that it made quite a stir. And as soon as it was, did I read? No, I actually didn't read it in translation. I actually read this already in English. So as soon as I could lay my hands on it, I read The Handmaid's Tale, and then moved on to other books by Margaret Atwood. And yes, she has been a favorite writer ever since. And I've read quite a few of her novels. What I like, again, is how she, how should I say, how she brings together themes of identity, feminism, but then also environmental issues. And again, she is one of those writers, now you see a theme here of things that I seem to like, who also like looks into myths and fairy tales. The books I have here is the Oryx and Crake trilogy, starting with Oryx and Crake, The Year of the Flood, and then Mad Adam. And they particularly kind of like look at environmental issues as well. And yeah, as I say, this particular mix that she has, also the language, the style she writes, I find it very, very beautiful. So Margaret Atwood is my second last author for this list, which just leaves the very last one, and that's a woman I think no other female writer probably has influenced so many other fantasy and science fiction writers. So I think she is a very good writer to round this up with and finish up with, and that is Ursula Le Guin. I've recently reread The Dispossessed, which again, as I said, I've discovered all those women when I was in university, kind of like just, I don't know, second year in university. And the same with Ursula Le Guin. I discovered her 1 year after Margaret Atwood in 1986. As I said, I recently reread it. I still like it, and I still think that she's an excellent writer. And yeah, apart from Tolkien, the other big writer of that time in my life that really convinced me to explore fantasy and science fiction literature, and yeah, kindled this lifelong love for this genre is definitely Ursula Le Guin. So I'm very happy that my chronological grouping has resulted in her being the last one I'm talking about. As I say, The Dispossessed, more a science fiction novel, but then of course she's also written fantasy novels, the Earthsea novels, with the first one, The Wizard of Earthsea. Interesting snippet, because when I found Ursula Le Guin, she was still alive and very much an active writer, so she hadn't written all the Earthsea novels, so only the first 3 of the Earthsea novels were out at that stage. I've never read the full how shall I say, the full series, nor any of the short stories that are associated with the Earthsea novels. And talking of short stories, I think she is an excellent short story writer. This is one of the collections that I own by her, Outer Space, Inner Lands. There are many collections of her short stories. Short stories are really my least favorite form of writing. Give me novels, give me poetry. I love poetry, but short stories, I don't know, we're not really friends, apart from Ursula Le Guin. Ursula Le Guin is one of the very few writers that can convince me to read her short stories because they're excellent. And that's high praise from me, who is really not into that. So yeah, Ursula Le Guin, the last on my list of 12 women's writers that I really love. Okay, what about you? Do you read any of those women? Do you like them? Do you not like them? Are there others that you like that I haven't mentioned, but should definitely know about? Please let me know in the comment section. And as always, thank you for watching. Happy reading and all the best.